Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, January 28th, 2019, and we're going to be looking at a 2020 presidential election prediction between Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks, of course, Vice President Joe Biden, and the incumbent president Donald Trump. So this is a very interesting scenario. Howard Schultz announced today, actually, that he is forming an exploratory committee to look out for the 2020 election for him running as an independent. Now, if you don't understand the full impact of an independent this powerful on a presidential level, you can almost be certain that this is going to benefit Donald Trump. Joe Biden already is at a point where he can win the election. That's without a doubt. But it's not going to be by such drastic margins. Howard Schultz is an independent, former lifelong Democrat, running as an independent because he thinks the party is drawing a little bit too far away from what he believes in terms of things such as healthcare. But he's most likely going to be a spoiler. Donald Trump could not have had it better. Donald Trump is already at a point where his approval rating is abysmal in a number of these key states. He's only approved of in 21 out of the 30 states that he won back in 2016. That's not a good sign. Howard Schultz, however, entering into this race, could take around 10% in certain states, 5% in others. But when races come down to around 1 to 2%, and you're taking votes away from the Democrat in an already close race, of course the GOP is going to come out on top. And if you just look at the Electoral College, Howard Schultz being he, is probably not going to get any electoral votes. He's probably not going to win any state, to be completely honest with you. An independent has never come this close. Ross Perot came close back in 1992, arguably 1996 doing not better, but still a good showing compared to other third-party candidates in recent history. But Howard Schultz probably could do as well as Ross Perot, but he's still probably not going to win any electoral votes. Sure, he'll probably get a lot of votes from states like California, New York, major Democratic centers because he is a Democrat at heart. And that's where the Democratic Party really needs to worry. Obviously, they're not going to lose California or New York. But states that come into question, like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Texas, the list goes on. That's where all of the margins are going to matter. Howard Schultz influencing this race whatsoever negatively impacts the Democratic Party because, of course, he's going to be getting more Democratic voters than Republican voters. He said, quote, that he does not want anyone, he more than anyone wants Donald Trump out of office, or the exact quote was, nobody wants to see Donald Trump out of office more than me. But even then, he said that he wouldn't do anything that ensures his reelection, but that's exactly what he's doing now. Again, there is a possibility he does drop out, but he has the money to get on every ballot. That's not the issue. There really is no issue with him running, other than the Democratic Party probably is going to attack him time and time again for this. But even at that, he's probably not going to drop out. There is a very big chance he keeps in because he wants to push for an electoral message. And this is not the year to do it. For the Democratic Party, if they are to push for an electoral message, they should do it a midterm year. They should not do it in a presidential year where so many things are at stake. They have been wanting Donald Trump out of office since he came in. Their hatred for him is very clear. Donald Trump has not been approved since his first month in office by Americans. And that's likely because the Democratic Party, even though it's not the majority, independents don't necessarily approve of the president, and there's no way the Democratic Party will ever approve of Donald Trump. And if they do lose this presidential election, what does that say about them? If they called him the weakest president, if they've attacked him for so many things, they've said he's messed up so much, what does that say for the Democratic Party if they lose this election? Even if there is a third-party quote-unquote spoiler, if the president is supposedly this bad, they should be winning, even with this spoiler in the race. But we're going to go ahead and characterize some Democratic states. We know California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii. These states are going to go to Joe Biden. Now, the margins are what matters. Washington and Oregon are probably going to be likely margins, whereas California and Hawaii remain in the safe column. Now, the reason for that, number one, if you look back at 2016, Washington and Oregon were safe states, sure, but you could push them back into the likely column if just a couple things had changed. If Howard Schultz is getting a pretty good amount of the vote, you can expect it to be a likely state. And likely means less than 15%, between 5 to 15%. It's a very large range, but it makes sense. For right now, those states go to Joe Biden. If you go up to the Northeast, these states are going to stay the same. Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, they just may be a little bit closer. You look up in the Northeast, Vermont's probably going to stay the same. New York is probably going to stay safe. New Jersey probably isn't going to narrow down. Connecticut, Rhode Island might be in the likely column, along with Delaware. But that still puts Joe Biden. Actually, no, sorry, not Delaware. Definitely not Delaware. If it was another Democrat like Hillary Clinton, then maybe. But right now, probably just Rhode Island, Connecticut. New Hampshire should not be safe. Going to actually come back to that one. I accidentally characterized that one as safe. Going up to the north, there actually isn't that many things we can fix right now. Illinois would probably be a likely state for Joe Biden. Now, for Donald Trump, he's going to run through this map like there's no tomorrow. I mean, he's going to go through this, and you're going to see a number of states stay in the safe column. They are probably not going to be discussed much. Going down to the south, same thing here. You look around to the rest of the country, of course, Donald Trump is going to do a little bit better. That is something that the Democratic Party needs to realize. I think they already have realized it. If they have Howard Schultz on this ballot, they are not going to do well in this presidential election, regardless of who the Democrat is. If it's Bernie Sanders, they would still lose this presidential election, most likely. Howard Schultz being in this race, it's at a point where he is going to only take away from the Democratic Party. Sure, there will be a small minority of the GOP voters that go to Howard Schultz in the presidential election for whatever reason. But the majority, and I mean super majority, of voters that vote for Howard Schultz are going to be Democrats that moved away from someone like Joe Biden. And if Joe Biden is the nominee, that means the primary didn't turn out too good for progressives. Same thing if Bernie Sanders is the nominee. How many of those centrist Democrats who don't want to see progressive reform as heavy as Bernie Sanders is pushing it, and they vote for Howard Schultz? Just keep that in mind. Other states probably would be a little bit closer, but the result would probably be the same, a Donald Trump re-election. Howard Schultz is not getting any electoral votes. Okay, the closest that a third-party candidate has gotten to winning electoral votes, I believe, would be Ross Perot in Maine back in '92. Howard Schultz probably will cap off at 11% maybe in certain Democratic states, maybe. But again, when these states come down to 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5%, and he takes away 6% of the vote from the Democrats, it's a Trump victory by 1%. So almost all of the Democratic progress in terms of a number of these states, sure, it's not going to impact the Senate, governor, House elections, but the presidential elections, the Democratic Party has been winning back these voters. If they lose it because some billionaire wants to enter the race and get a message through, that's not going to be good for them. So we look at this electoral map. We have 125 electoral votes and for Donald Trump, 182 for Joe Biden. We can go through the rest of the map. So we know that Texas is probably going to be a safe state. At this point, it's not going to be likely just because, again, you're taking votes away. Donald Trump would still probably carry that state. Looking over at states like Georgia, that one would probably be still a lean state. You're not going to see much support for Howard Schultz in the South, but still a lean state. A win is a win, regardless. Second district in the state of Nebraska would probably still be a lean district. Maine's second district would actually probably go into the likely margin, just leading over that 5% mark. But the first district in the state of Maine would probably still go to Joe Biden by a narrow margin. Sorry, not by a narrow margin. By a likely margin. Maine at large would probably be a narrow margin. But going up to the Northeast, New Hampshire would probably go to Donald Trump. Even though New Hampshire is a Democratic state, it's probably going to be close enough where that Howard Schultz does take away votes from Joe Biden. You go over to Iowa and Ohio, you can expect those states to probably narrow down because it is a candidate like Joe Biden who can do pretty well in those states. Iowa, actually, I would say is a likely state. Ohio narrows down. North Carolina goes into the lean column for Donald Trump. An area where I do think that Joe Biden can do well in is probably New Mexico. I think he can win that state in the lean margin. Colorado goes into the lean margin as well, giving Joe Biden 199 electoral votes. But when it comes down to the rest of these states, it's going to get very hard, very fast. Virginia, I would say that one narrowly goes to Joe Biden. I mean, that's pushing it, but still a narrow victory. Looking at the rest of these states, Howard Schultz hasn't really come out with his opinion on many issues, to be completely honest with you. So we can't really gauge his appeal that well. We do understand that a number of Democrats are going to vote for him, which is why this map looks the way it does. But still, even then, Donald Trump isn't going to exactly have such a large blowout election. You know, the most he's going to get more is probably 12 more electoral votes than what he got back in 2016. 18 is pushing it, but it's still not that large of a margin, especially with a third-party candidate this big. We have 2 billionaires running, and then Joe Biden. But, of course, Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee at this point. Name recognition, everything going for him. When you go over to a number of these states, I would say that Donald Trump probably still narrowly carries the Rust Belt, holding on to these states. I would give Minnesota to Joe Biden, but we have to come back and rethink that one. Arizona would go to Donald Trump. Florida would still go to Donald Trump. I think it would be a larger margin, maybe 3-4%, but still goes to Donald Trump regardless. But for Minnesota, Nevada, I would say Minnesota narrowly goes to Biden. Nevada narrowly goes to Biden. And although these states are going to be very close, I think Joe Biden is probably going to push the state of Minnesota, along with a number of other Democratic candidates, over to around 7-8%. Howard Schultz takes away 5-6%. Still a victory for Joe Biden. Nevada has definitely shown a lot more improvement for Democrats from 2016. But again, this map is contingent on that they do keep up that trend. We finish our electoral map at 0 electoral votes for Howard Schultz, as you might expect, 228 for Joe Biden, and Donald Trump is reelected president with 310 electoral votes, flipping the state of New Hampshire. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching today's video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.